A young girl vanishes without a trace in the depths of an eerie forest. Her distraught parents find only a tattered, lifeless doll near where she disappeared. But what if that doll isn't just a clue? What if it's something far worse? Something alive, something watching, waiting. Stay tuned for a story that will haunt you long after it ends. It started like any other autumn afternoon in the quiet town of Ravenswood. The air was crisp, leaves danced in the breeze, and the thick forest surrounding the town stood like a wall of shadows. 7-year-old Ellie Thompson, a spirited and curious child, often played at the edge of the woods despite her parents' warnings. The forest had always been a place of mystery. Locals spoke in hushed whispers about Ashen Hollow, a part of the woods that no one dared enter. Legends told of children who had wandered into the hollow and were never seen again. But on this particular day, Ellie ignored the warnings. She chased a bright red butterfly deeper into the trees, her laughter echoing through the woods. When Sarah and David Thompson realized she hadn't returned home for dinner, panic set in. They called out for her, their voices trembling. Minutes turned into hours as they searched the darkening woods with flashlights in hand. Just as the last sliver of sunlight disappeared, they stumbled into a small clearing. There, lying in the middle of the clearing, was not their daughter, but a doll. It was unlike any doll they had ever seen. Its face was porcelain, cracked and weathered, with pale blue eyes that seemed too lifelike. Its dress, once white, was stained with dirt and dark blotches. Its small hands were chipped, and the expression on its face was disturbingly serene. Sarah bent down to pick it up, her fingers trembling. As soon as she touched it, an icy chill shot through her body. The doll was warm. Sarah, David, something's not right. Before David could respond, the doll's eyes blinked. They rushed home with the doll, confused and terrified. As they sat it on the living room table, the air seemed to grow heavier. Sarah's heart sank with a terrible thought. What if this doll had something to do with Ellie's disappearance? They didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house sent shivers down their spines. Around midnight, Sarah heard soft footsteps in the hallway, followed by a sound that froze her in place. A quiet giggle. It was Ellie's giggle. She bolted from the bed, David close behind her. The footsteps led them to the living room, where the doll now sat upright on the floor. Its once lifeless face seemed different. Its eyes were brighter, almost glowing, and its mouth curled into a faint smile. Then, the doll spoke. "Mama." She bolted from the bed, David close behind her. The footsteps led them to the living room, where the doll now sat upright on the floor. Its once lifeless face seemed different. Its eyes were brighter, almost glowing, and its mouth curled into a faint smile. The voice was faint, but unmistakably Ellie's. Sarah whispered, "Ellie?" The doll's head tilted, its eyes brimming with tears, real tears. "Doll, I'm scared, Mama, help me." The next morning, they sought help from Mrs. Whitmore, the town's historian. She was an old woman with sharp eyes and an unsettling knowledge of Ravenswood's secrets. When Sarah placed the doll on her table, Mrs. Whitmore gasped and crossed herself. "Mrs. Whitmore, this doll is from Ashen Hollow. I've seen it before, many years ago." Mrs. Whitmore leaned in closer. "Mrs. Whitmore, Ashen Hollow is cursed. Legend says the forest was once home to an ancient coven of witches. When the townspeople drove them out, they left behind a curse, one that takes the souls of children and traps them in lifeless objects, leaving only these twisted reminders." Sarah's voice trembled. "Are you saying this? This is Ellie?" Mrs. Whitmore's response was chilling. "The longer the doll remains, the more she will change. She may sound like your daughter now, but soon, she'll become something else entirely. Something dangerous." Days passed, and the doll's changes became more pronounced. Its once stiff limbs became more flexible, its porcelain skin softening into something eerily human. Ellie's voice grew stronger, but her tone changed, becoming colder, more mocking. Days passed, and the doll's changes became more pronounced. Its once stiff limbs became more flexible, its porcelain skin softening into something eerily human. Ellie's voice grew stronger, but her tone changed, becoming colder, more mocking. At first it was subtle, a strange laugh here, a whisper in the dark. But soon, it grew darker. One evening Sarah found the doll sitting at the dinner table, a knife clutched in its tiny hand. "You should have left me in the woods." They decided it was time to act. Sarah and David knew they had to take the doll back to Ashen Hollow. Under the cover of darkness, they made their way into the forest, the doll thrashing in Sarah's arms, as it screamed in Ellie's voice. "No! Don't take me back! I'll be good, Mama, please!" Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but she pressed on. She knew the creature inside the doll was no longer her daughter. The forest seemed to come alive around them. Trees groaned, shadows writhed, and the wind howled like a beast. They reached the clearing where they had found the doll. The air was thick and suffocating, the ground vibrating beneath their feet. The doll's eyes snapped open, glowing with an unnatural green light. The ground trembled violently, and a deafening roar filled the air. The doll let out a final bone-chilling scream before it crumbled into dust. The forest fell silent. The oppressive weight in the air lifted and the wind stilled. Sarah and David stood there for hours, waiting, hoping that Ellie would appear. But she didn't. They returned home, their hearts broken. The house was empty, silent and cold without Ellie's laughter. Yet as they lay in bed that night, they heard it again. A soft giggle coming from the hallway. Sarah bolted upright, her heart pounding. She ran to the hallway, but there was nothing there. Just shadows. To this day they still hear her sometimes. The sound of small footsteps, a faint giggle in the dead of night, and in the depths of Ashen Hollow some say you can still see a doll sitting in the clearing, waiting for its next victim.